Are you ready? Yes. Are you ready? Bring your left.
So talk about your philosophy and approach to making wine, Jeff.
Well, it's kind of a cliche that good wine starts in the vineyard, but it's true. I guess my first feeling is that you kind of need to go with what the vineyard gives you. So, for example, our vineyards are in a fairly warm area.
Mm-hmm.
Gives us grapes that are fairly ripe, and that dictates the style of our wines. So you take the grapes in from the vineyard, and they're kind of they are what they are. There were certainly things that you could have done in the past to affect what you were going to get, but once they come into the winery, they are what they are, and you have to work with them. As far as my actual winemaking, I tend definitely to be a more technical, scientific sort of winemaker. I believe that if I'm doing something with my wines, I want to have a good reason for doing it, as opposed to there's a lot of people who just do something and I don't think they have any good scientifically based reason for what they're doing. I'm not nearly as romantic in my outlook as a lot of other winemakers. I'm trying to make a very good product. And so what goes into making a very good product? I basically make red wines except for rosé. And I think a red wine, particularly of the style that we make, and I want to emphasize that because none of this would apply if you were making Pinot Noir. But for what we make, I want a lot of concentration. I want wines with good acidity. I want wines that will go well with food. I like wines with a pretty decent amount of tannin. Mm-hmm. So my winemaking is definitely geared towards accomplishing those things.
Would you say, given that the you like good acidity, you like a fair amount of tannins, are your wines built to age?
I think our wines will age quite well, but I want to put a big caveat in there, which is the biggest single thing to predict how well a wine will age is how well it's aged in the past.
Right. Exactly.
And we don't have that history. So, if you're going to say what causes a wine to age, you can talk about good acidity, you can talk about tannin, and all those are very legitimate things to talk about, but none of them are as important as how the wine is aged in the past.
Absolutely. So talk about your vineyard management approach.
That's a big question, so let me try to divide it up into a few things that I think are really important. It's very important that the vine be balanced. And by balanced, what I mean is that there be a good relationship between the amount of fruit and the amount of leaf on the vine. Mm-hmm. Basically, the vine divides up its resources between the fruit and the leaf. Mm-hmm. And the more fruit you carry, the less leaf it will produce. If you carry too much fruit, then you have shorter shoots, which results in a situation called overcropping, and the shorter shoots are not able to provide enough energy to the fruit to obtain optimal quality. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if the shoots get too long, then what happens is they tend to keep growing beyond mid-season, and it's very important to cut off that leaf growth by mid-season so that the vine directs its energy to the fruit. So one of the main things you want to do is get your vine balanced, which is not always as easy to do as we'd like. Mm-hmm. When you have a lot of vigor, which we tend to have, then you can have a very difficult time having enough fruit to basically get the vine to shut down its leaf growing when it's supposed to. Mm-hmm. So one of the things you try to do is hang the right amount of fruit. And, for example, we have one vineyard where the quality has always been pretty good, but we've had too much in the way of shoot length, too much leaf. So we're trying something this year, which they use a lot in Australia, called minimal pruning, which basically allows a lot more fruit to grow on the vine. And at least so far it seems to be having a good effect, but we won't know until after harvest and we try making some wine from it. Another important thing is controlling the amount of water going to the vine. The vine will tend to keep growing if you keep giving it lots of water, so you want to make sure that it has an appropriate amount of water, not too much, not too little. In wine parlance is often talked about as being a stressed vine. Really, a stressed vine is one that has its water restricted. So you do want to stress it to an amount, without going overboard and harming the vine.
Right.
When you harvest is huge. I have my own criteria for when I harvest, and it's primarily based upon physically how the grape is, both in terms of how it looks and how it tastes. I'm not so concerned about getting flavors that I think are going to be flavors I want to see in the bottle, because they usually develop later, but they're flavors I don't want to see. So if I'm chewing on the grape and I'm getting a lot of very strong green herbaceous flavors, I will not pick, even if the numbers are kind of telling you it's time. It's not time. So the things I look for, aside from measuring the sugar and maybe measuring the acidity, though I don't really rely too much on acidity levels at that point, I will chew on the grapes, see how they taste, see if they have any of those green flavors. If they're very tannic, that's an indication you should wait. When you cut the grape open, what I like to see is the seeds are brown and yellow with very little green seed. I want to see earlier in the ripeness period, the grapes, the pulp kind of sticks to the seed, and as it matures, it tends to not stick. I want to see the not sticking.
Gotcha.
So those are the primary things I look for. There's other things I probably look for that I'm not thinking of right now, but those are the primary things I look for. Since I don't like high alcohol levels, usually what I'll do is I will bleed off some of the juice, replace it with water and tartaric acid, which basically replaces a solution of tartaric acid, sugar, and water with a solution of just tartaric acid. And the effect of that is you reduce the sugar, so you reduce the alcohol level.
So, Jeff, Artisan's not one of the big boys of the wine world. You're a small boutique winery making, carefully crafted, so the wines aren't widely known. Does that allow you to take more risks, to be more bold and daring in your approach, or does that mean you have to be more careful and take fewer risks?
I would say we need to be more careful. If you're Gallo and you have 10,000 gallons of wine go off on you, first of all, if you had to flush it down the drain, it wouldn't be the biggest, the hundreds of thousands of other gallons you have.
Right.
We don't have that luxury. So I'd say we tend to be pretty careful. That's not to say we're not innovative. We do a lot of things that I think are pretty innovative in a careful sort of way. We try to avoid doing things that's going to cause a tank to go off on us.
Sure, so it's more calculated risk.
It's very much a calculated risk. Before we implement something on a large scale, we always try it on a small scale. And only when we feel that, this looks like it's justified will we expand it into general production.
3 minutes and we're out of here. The clock